Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. Today's session is called Diversifying the Environmental Workforce, the Advancement of Women in Environmental and Engineering Careers. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to recognize the traditional Indigenous lands where EcoCanada's office is based in Calgary. At EcoCanada, we're committed to working towards respectful acknowledgement, collaboration, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples across Canada. This starts with acknowledging our honor and privilege to live and work within the Treaty 7 territory. Today, we are presenting from the City of Calgary, home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We would also like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Niitsitapi, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda, which include Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. My name is Danielle Fisher, and I'm the lead event manager for EcoCanada, and I will be moderating this webinar today. Before we start, there are a few housekeeping guidelines for today's session to ensure that everyone can enjoy and participate in the webinar effectively. All participants are muted, so please check your audio settings to ensure that you can hear us properly. If you're experiencing any technical issues, please use the question box and select EcoCanada, the organizer, and I will do all that I can to resolve the issue. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on demand to you within the next 24 hours. Everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email with a link to the video. Any questions that you have about the presentation or today's topic can be submitted through the chat box or question box. We will have dedicated time after the presentation to answer any questions from the audience. Finally, we really want to know what you think about our webinars and how we can keep improving. You will be sent a short survey after the webinar ends. Please let us know what you think of it or if you have any comments or suggestions about this webinar. EcoCanada's vision is to build the world's leading environmental workforce. EcoCanada seeks to help environmental workers succeed at each step of their career journey. To do this, EcoCanada has developed programs tailored to individuals at different stages of their career. For those looking to enter the environmental workforce, EcoCanada provides training through the BEAR program and accreditation for environmental programs at post-secondary institutions. EcoCanada also provides opportunities for new workers to break into the environmental sector through wage funding for co-op students and recent post-secondary graduates. For those already employed as environmental workers, EcoCanada provides the environmental professional and environmental professional in training certifications. Lastly, EcoCanada provides opportunities for those with vast experience as environmental workers to provide guidance and direction to EcoCanada's products and programs through advisory committees and emeritus membership. Without further ado, I will now introduce our wonderful presenters today. First up, we have Jenny Peters. Jenny is an economist with a PhD in economics from Texas A&M University. As the Labour Market Information Manager at EcoCanada, she is responsible for the management, execution, and delivery of environmental LMI projects, working with an army of professionals comprised of staff, consultants, strategic advisors, and subject matter experts. Next, we will have Lindsay Coffin. Lindsay is a Senior Research Associate at the Conference Board of Canada and has spent the past 6 years conducting labour market research and has been involved with several projects aimed at increasing the participation of women in the labour force. Over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Danielle. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. I'd like to start my section of the presentation by talking a little bit about what environmental workers mean to us at EcoCanada. We've classified environmental workers as individuals across any industry, any occupation, whose job drives or supports the goals of environmental protection, resource management, and sustainability. We've been able to identify two broad types of environmental workers. One includes individuals who are, regardless of whatever industry they work in, required to have specific environmental competencies in order to be able to conduct their job. These are individuals we refer to as core environmental workers. And an example might be a sustainability specialist working at a mining company, or a wildlife conservation specialist working in a forestry or an oil and gas organization. These are individuals whose job it is to protect, manage, and sustain our environment directly. We also have individuals who may or may not need to have environmental competencies, but whose work contributes to the provision of environmental goods and services. These are the environmental goods and services sector workers. Any individual, regardless of occupation, and regardless of whether they have environmental competencies, can be included in this category if they're working for an organization that directly provides or creates environmental goods and services. This would include HR professionals, accountants, administrative assistants, truck drivers. A wide variety of different types of professionals can fall into this category. When we talk about environmental workforce, we look at both of these types of individuals, the core environmental workers and the environmental goods and services sector workers. When we take a look at the employment over the next 5 years, or the anticipated employment over the next 5 years, we see a growth in the number of environmental workers that are going to be needed in Canada, a growth of about 109,000 workers. That's about 16.6% growth from 2019 to 2025. Another interesting fact that we observe when we take a look at the trend line for environmental workforce growth, when we compare it to total workforce growth, we see that during the COVID pandemic, the total workforce shrank by about 1 million workers over the 2019-2020 period, and then rose back up, but not quite to the 19.1 million level as it was in 2021. In contrast, the environmental workforce across Canada continued to grow throughout the pandemic, which suggests that the work that's being done is often considered to be essential services, and much of that work can be done by individuals who have flexible work arrangements. In terms of top occupations amongst the core workers in environmental employment, civil engineers are right at the top with an estimated 26,300 civil engineers who are environmental workers in 2020. Similarly, we estimated about 18,300 administrative officers were environmental workers, another 11,100 inspectors and public and environmental health and occupational health and safety, 10,900 construction managers were environmental workers, and then more than 10,000 of the senior managers in health, education, social, and community services. To give you a snapshot of what we anticipate over the next 5 years in the environmental workforce, we estimated that there were approximately 689,900 environmental workers in 2020. Of that, approximately 37% of those jobs are going to be for core environmental workers. We also see that there are going to be some new jobs created due to the expansion of economic activity in the environmental sector. Another 74,400 workers are anticipated, or jobs are anticipated. Plus, we think that there are going to be another 98,300 job openings occurring due to retirements. This is what we refer to as replacement demand. When we combine the expansion demand plus the replacement demand, we estimate a total net hiring or net job openings of 172,700 environmental jobs through the year 2025. Now, as I showed you in the previous couple of slides, civil engineers are right at the top of the list when it comes to environmental workers. But engineers as a whole are very important to the environmental and sustainability sector. Much of the work that they do integrates environmental specific knowledge, and they're involved in the development of new products and processes as well. Taking a look at the net hiring requirements through 2025, we see at our top civil engineers, followed by electrical and electronics engineers, which is consistent with the potential movement towards a more electrified transportation system. Other professional engineers, engineering managers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, and industrial and manufacturing engineers are all going to be in demand going forward through 2025. Switching gears for a moment and taking a look at the diversity of the workforce, EcoCanada conducted a survey in 2021, which allowed us to gather information from environmental companies about their environmental workers, specifically the demographics of those workers. The respondents to our survey indicated that 6% of their employees, their environmental employees, were Indigenous persons. 4% were persons with disabilities, and 18% were considered visible minorities or considered themselves to be visible minorities. In terms of the Indigenous persons, we see that the 6% representation in the environmental workforce is slightly higher than the overall representation of the Indigenous population in Canada's entire labor force population. In contrast, comparing the 18% who identified as visible minorities, we see that that's slightly lower than the 21.2% of Canada's entire labor force population. This falls into another category of gender diversity as well. We see that there is some disparity in terms of gender diversity, where 51% of Canada's total working population were female, but only 46% of the employees, the environmental employees of our respondents were female. We see that according to the organization size, we see different levels of equity or inequity in terms of the representation by gender as well. Specifically, we see that small and medium-sized companies are much closer to having just over a third of their workforce being being female environmental workers, whereas the micro-organizations and the large organizations have larger proportions of their environmental workforce being female. We also see that across industries, we have some variation in terms of the representation of women in the workforce, in the environmental workforce. And in particularly, we see that in the construction industry and in the administrative and support, waste management and remediation services industries, we have lower proportions of women involved in the environmental work in those industries. That can be a reflection of the overall representation of women in those industries, particularly in the construction industry, where we are aware that the representation of women is rather limited overall as well. That wraps up my presentation, so I'll turn it over to Lindsay now for hers.
Great, thank you very much, Jenny. So my name is Lindsay Coffin, and I'm a Senior Research Associate at the Conference Board of Canada. And we were contracted to do some work with EcoCanada on helping them kind of identify best practices for helping organizations diversify the environmental workforce. So we decided to create a toolkit of resources for employers promoting policies and practices aimed at increasing diversity in environmental and engineering careers. The goals of this program and this toolkit were to help to contribute to addressing systemic barriers by advancing inclusive and progressive policies and practices in the STEM sector, supporting employers in tackling persistent, harmful gender norms and attitudes to support the career progression of women, enabling equitable and effective sharing of resources that can help women advance to leadership, supporting organizations to foster collaboration to accelerate systemic change, and providing guidance for employers on how they can create more positive distribution of authority, voices, and decision-making power. So I'm not saying we're going to solve all of these problems with this toolkit, but they should help guide organizations in the right direction. There were several project activities that were a component of this research. The first was outreach. So we reached out to 140 organizations and asked them if they could share resources, ideas, and best practices around creating equitable and diverse organizations. From this research and outreach, we then developed a business case showing why it is important to help increase diversity in environmental and engineering careers. We also heard of 4 really creative and unique programs that we decided to profile as case studies. And we've created a list of publicly available resources for organizations to reference to help them in their goal of diversifying their workforces. And of course, there's today, which is the webinar. So as Jenny summed up very nicely at the beginning section of this webinar, we need environmental workers. 30% of the workforce is expected to retire in the next 10 years, and Canadian organizations may need to hire roughly 233,000 environmental workers by 2029. And as Jenny showed, women and immigrants are slightly underrepresented in environmental and engineering occupations compared to the overall Canadian labor force. So what does this mean? It means that there is a huge opportunity for organizations to recruit, attract, and retain women, immigrants, and Indigenous workers in the environmental sector. And there's the biggest opportunity, or one of the biggest opportunities for this, is within engineers. Engineers Canada recognizes that there is a significant lack of women in the engineering careers. And this is important because it provides a large opportunity for organizations. While Engineer Canada has made increasing the representation of women in engineering a strategic priority, they've set a goal of 30% of engineers to identify as female by 2030. However, enrollment in engineering post-secondary programs is still significantly skewed towards males. By focusing on the attraction, retention, and professional development of women engineers through strategic initiatives, Engineers Canada hopes to benefit from an improved economic performances, meeting labor market demands, and a profession that more accurately reflects the diversity of the Canadian population. So how do we do this? Well, by fostering inclusion in the workplace, we can help to address some of those labor shortages that we've been discussing. So organizations are looking to strengthen their ability to attract, recruit, and retain workers through numerous initiatives, including engaging more diverse workers. Developing a pool of diverse and qualified candidates is crucial for the sustainability of environmental and engineering careers. You need people to do the work. By creating inclusive workplaces, organizations can diversify their workforces to address skill shortages in an increasingly competitive market for talent. Not only are retirements expected to grow, demand is also expected to increase for these types of careers. So we know that it's a problem and that we need to increase attraction and retention of women in the workforce. So I'm going to go over 4 really unique programs that I encountered during our initial outreach. So the first relates to mentorship, and it's developed by Nature Canada's, and it's called their Women in Nature Mentorship Program. So mentorship programs are designed, this mentorship program is designed specifically for women, and it can help them overcome gender-specific obstacles to advance their careers. So previous research has shown that having a formal mentorship program in the workplace reduces the burden of having to identify a mentor, enabling all interested women to participate. So it's not only about who you know in the workplace. 67% of women reported that they had learned the most important lessons about leadership from other women. So having women mentoring women is a really important aspect, and there are very positive results associated with it. Also, 82% of professional women believe access to and networking with female leaders can help advance their careers. And after seeing other women lead organizations, it encourages women to believe that they can also be leaders. So, Nature Canada launched their Women in Nature mentorship program in 2017, and it is a platform for professional women in the conservation sector to share their experiences and offer advice to future leaders in conservation. So it provides an opportunity for women to grow both professionally and individually, and it is designed to increase the number of young women leaders by matching them with professional women role models. Mentors model leadership skills, inspire confidence, and assist with the formal or informal networks that can facilitate their future path to leadership positions. It also strengthens the responsiveness to community needs, offers exposure to informative role models, affirms existing strengths, and builds management skills. They believe that if young women from diverse backgrounds are active in natural sciences, outdoor education, or nature groups, and if they can be connected to senior women leaders, then these young women become stronger and more effective leaders in their communities because their critical thinking skills, confidence, and leadership skills are enhanced, which reduces barriers to career advancement. To date, they've had 50 women go through this program over 3 cohorts. So their first was a pilot, it was 10 women, and the next 2 were 20 women in each cohort. So, and they've shown some pretty promising results, with over 3/4 ranking the effectiveness of mentorships as high to very high. 86 to 90% ranked that the pairing was well matched, so that they really appreciated the work that went into identifying a mentor that would help them in their career and was part of an organization that they were interested in. And 90 to 93 reported that they would recommend the Nature Canada mentoring program to other members. The next really interesting thing we saw organizations do is Ontario Power Generation's Indigenous Opportunities Network. This is a great initiative that kind of provides opportunities for Indigenous men and women in the workforce by aligning qualified members of these different groups with positions in the Ontario Power Generation operations. It was created in 2018 in response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Call to Action number 92, which calls on corporate Canada to help create a better future for Indigenous workers. It works towards creating an engaged and inclusive workforce that reflects the broad diversity of Indigenous communities and people across OPG and the greater energy sector. It's a community-centered program that recruits job-ready Indigenous people from various energy sector occupations, including skilled trades, project management, and administrative roles. And it's part of the broader Ontario Power Generation's Reconciliation Action Plan. So there are 5 distinct steps that applicants have to follow using this program. The first is completing an application, and the second is undergoing a comprehensive skills assessment. They also need to go through an online security clearance application for site security. And then once those 3 steps are completed, they're matched with opportunities and then provided with orientation and training designed to provide a health and safety overview, as well as specific occupational training required for the applicant's specific skill set. So if they're an engineer, they get engineering training for OPG, and then they are placed in an occupation that is aligned with the applicant's skills and interests. Oh, sorry, there's an error on this slide. There are 73 Indigenous candidates who have successfully transitioned into the energy sector occupations through the program since ION was implemented in 2018. In 2020, the program was expanded to include more industries and now includes OPG's entire operations, building on the success of the initial program and to meet growing interest in hiring Indigenous candidates by companies within OPG's network. Currently, 30% of ION candidates are women, and they're working towards a goal of increasing the participation of women to 50% through various activities and programs. The third really creative and interesting program we profiled isn't from an environmental or engineering focused organization, it's from SAP. And they worked in collaboration with another organization to create the Matern program. The Matern program was specifically designed to address what's known as the motherhood penalty. The motherhood penalty describes a unique form of workplace discrimination where mothers are given fewer opportunities for advancement, have lower likelihood of receiving a job offer, and lower recommended salaries compared to men and childless women. On average, mothers are 8.2 times less likely to be promoted than women without children and are paid 12% less. So understanding that there is an inherent bias towards mothers in the workplace is an important first step. And the Matern program is designed to help women transition through all the stages of motherhood. So from pregnancy to maternity leave to reintegration back into the workforce. It's a hybrid model program that provides mothers and mothers-to-be with a support system that will help them navigate through the complex relationship between motherhood and pursuing a meaningful career. It includes 8 self-directed modules covering topics ranging from maternity leave benefits and communication with your employer to creating a comprehensive return to work plan and redefining work-life balance for moms. There are live group coaching calls and a private online community for new moms to network and to kind of navigate those problems together. The reason that SAP wanted to look at this specific program designed for new moms is that they consistently found that women who were in leadership track positions were also commonly those who would be starting a family. Through the Matern program, SAP hopes to address one of the barriers to advancement of women to leadership positions in their organization. They're also planning to introduce training for managers that is designed to provide them with information and best practices on how to support these employees through their transition to motherhood. By creating awareness of maternal bias, the motherhood penalty, and common scenarios related to pregnancy, parental leave, and the return to work, managers are better equipped to confidently navigate situations that may arise as employees transition through these stages of parental leave. The last kind of program we looked into to help address the lack of women in these types of careers is one of Catalyst's programs. It's called the Men Advocating Real Change program, and it was implemented on site by Suncor this past summer. So they don't have any results to share with us yet, but we can go over what the program kind of is designed for. So male alloys are important in advancing DE&I. Engaging men in gender diversity initiatives is crucial for building the necessary workplace culture that embraces diversity and ensures long-term success. The Men Advocating Real Change program is a catalyst initiative that inspires men to leverage their unique opportunity and responsibility to be advocates for equity. Their research-based experiential learning disrupts traditional DEI approaches to enhance gender partnership and accelerate the creation of inclusive workplaces. When men are actively involved, organizations are more successful in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives compared to those who do not engage men. And the difference is staggering. So it's 96% versus 30%. So you are more than 3 times more likely to be successful in advancing diversity when you have men actively involved in creating and implementing these diversity initiatives. So that's something you want to keep in mind as you're starting to develop your own organizational programs. In mid-2022, Suncor began this pilot program using the MARC Dialogue team's initiatives in collaboration with Catalyst. This program specifically focused on building inclusive behaviors and enhancing workplace culture through all levels of the organization. By engaging men as advocates for change, Suncor hopes to increase the attraction, recruitment, and retention of women to their workforce by reducing some of the barriers that women in male-dominated industries face. While the project is currently underway, preliminary feedback is encouraging. So they're hearing that men are learning a lot from this program, but they haven't actually been able to measure any results because the program is still underway. Some final thoughts. So diversity increases strength. Diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplaces have been shown to have stronger financial performance and profitability than organizations that have less diverse teams. Employees who experience increased feelings of inclusion or belonging are 50% less likely to leave and 56% more productive and take 75% fewer sick days. Although there is a strong financial business case for increasing diversity, there are also numerous non-financial benefits for organizations that diversify their workforce, including increased collaboration, greater innovation, higher employee engagement, and increased productivity. High rates of retirement create both challenges and opportunities for organizations to reimagine future workforces that better reflect the diversity of the Canadian population. With 30% of the workforce expected to retire in the next 10 years, developing a pool of diverse and qualified talent is crucial for the sustainability of environmental careers. A worsening shortage of environmental labor is being compounded by increasing demand for environmental workers. Canadian organizations may need to hire roughly 233,000 environmental workers by 2029. In addition to this, more and more businesses are innovating and adding new jobs that require workers with STEM-related training and skills. To cope with this demand, organizations are looking to strengthen their ability to attract, recruit, and retain workers through numerous initiatives, including engaging more diverse workers. High rates of retirement create both challenges and opportunities for organizations to reimagine the future workforces that better reflect the diversity of the Canadian population. Loss of organizational knowledge and experience is a considerable challenge facing companies with employees nearing retirement age. By creating inclusive workplaces, organizations can diversify their workforces to address skill shortages in an increasingly competitive market for talent. Organizations should create comprehensive succession plans to ensure that the transfer of the appropriate organizational knowledge to the next generations of leaders creates space for increased representation among underrepresented groups at all levels. As the need for new employees will continue to grow, employers need to find new ways to recruit, attract, and retain new talent. Building diverse and inclusive workforces not only allows organizations to leverage numerous benefits, it will become increasingly critical for them to continue their operations. Developing a pool of diverse and qualified talent is crucial for the sustainability of environmental careers. And Jenny and I would be happy to take any questions.
I'll just hold on the line for a few more moments to see if any questions come through. That was a wonderful presentation, ladies. Thank you so much. This concludes our webinar. You will be provided with a recording within 24 hours of once this webinar concludes. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.